Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how's everything today?
Yeah, it's all good. We were just talking off air. There's some stuff that we want to cover, some stuff that there's no point covering, but it's going to be UFC 284 that we're going to be focusing on because it's a massive fight card, big preview coming up, and it's compelling. There's a fair, it's not the best pay-per-view card we've ever seen, but it's certainly more compelling than this past weekend's fights, to say the least.
So the news coming out from this weekend, before we get to the pound for pound number one versus number two, the news from the past weekend, Fedor lost and retired. I don't think any of us are surprised. And we could talk about that one nonstop. Yeah, it's just talk about Bellator and Fedor, but we'll try not to. Derek Lewis lost, against a grappler. And then Conor McGregor is apparently going to be back coaching The Ultimate Fighter against Michael Chandler. But no fight has yet been agreed upon. It's just what's the word I'm looking for? It's been assumed that there will be a fight, but it hasn't been. See, there's a lot more moving parts with the Ultimate Fighter thing. What do you think? Is Michael Chandler the right fight? What's going on with the actual fight itself? Coaching the Ultimate Fighter, he's still not in the USADA testing pool. It's a fun story for all these reasons.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I genuinely do think they will compete at the end of it. From what I've heard, it'll be September time, but if that's what, 9 months from the start of the year. We're in the middle of February now. If he gets in the testing pool, he's available to fight. I think 6 months he's got to be in the testing pool, because we know that he's been, I don't want to say juicing, but potentially taking performance enhancing drugs. This came out a few weeks ago. We spoke on it. Exactly, yeah. And it's for, essentially for speeded up recovery due to the broken leg.
Sure.
I'm not too mad about that. That can't become a precedent. That can't become a loophole that people can do.
Yeah.
Because
Anderson Silva never used it as an excuse when he got caught juicing and broke his leg. He never put the two together.
Chris Weidman spoke last night on the Ariel show saying he's looking for a return in the summer. He's had to have multiple surgeries. I don't know how many McGregor's had, but Chris Weidman's had to have multiple surgeries, and he, from what we understand, hasn't had one of these exceptions. We get guys with. Unfortunately, it's a sport where we get guys with broken legs. We get guys, with broken arms. Frank Mir's breaking people's arms as a heavyweight champion. None of these guys got exceptions back then. So, for me, he's got to enter the USADA testing pool. He's got to piss clean for 6 months.
Yeah.
I'd say, even longer than that. But, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think it's trending towards a September date at welterweight. I'm excited. I tweeted the other day, I haven't watched TUF for a number of years. The last TUF season I can remember religiously watching is probably, I don't even know what TUF it is, the Nico Montano when she won it, because that was quite exciting. New champion, new division, a couple of names coming back, a couple of names dropping down from bantamweight, new girls in the division. But even then, it was Justin Gaethje and Eddie Alvarez didn't have a whole lot of needle between the two of them. So it was like, they're kind of just ticking over. This is going to get me watching.
When you're watching it now, it's an aged model. It was based on Survivor. It was based on The Apprentice back when that was trending. To do it now, you're just like, isn't there a better way that we can do these kind of we need these two guys in a room for a few months for TV. Somehow we need to do that. And maybe there's a better way than The Ultimate Fighter, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, what I'm worried about is how seriously McGregor's going to take this. Because it's not fair on the guys. We've seen him not turn up to press conferences. We've seen him, everybody knows what McGregor's like. He's got 20 lawsuits hanging over him at the moment. We know that Michael Chandler will go all in on this. He will be excellent TV. He will be, I think, an excellent coach. He's got the experience of fighting, Bellator for the most of his life. Now he's come over to the UFC. He's an exciting fighter. He's well-rounded. He's a phenomenal wrestler, and that's something that we forget with Michael Chandler. It's because he just loves to stand and have a war with everyone he faces. I'm not mad about it. I think he kind of realized he's probably never going to be UFC lightweight champion, so why not just go in? I mean, this fight is going to be more lucrative to him than a fight with, Islam Makhachev.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Chandler will go all in on this. And, at the moment, I don't think there's too much needle between the two guys. I think there's a respect between the two guys, because, you can't not respect what Conor's done for the sport.
Absolutely.
And also, you can't not respect what Michael Chandler's done in his short UFC career. He's come in, he's put on exciting fights. In every single fight that he's been in has been, must-watch TV. And And I think, there's a respect between the two guys. But I spoke to Gillian Robertson last night, and obviously
Nice.
she came up through TUF on the Eddie Alvarez and Gaethje season, and she
Nice.
said, "Look, there wasn't a lot of needle, but I said, how do you think it will go? Because there wasn't a lot of needle between those two guys." And she said, "Yeah, but when you were around each other, these two ultra competitive guys, they begin to get under each other's skin. The little jabs here and there. You've got, sort of team versus team mentality."
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially with McGregor, who knows how to get under people's skin and ramp it up from, 0 to 100. I think by the time these guys fight, whether it will be September, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see these guys fight until November at MSG on the anniversary of the 30th,
Yes.
30th year of the UFC.
Yes.
For me, that's a little bit too long. I want to see McGregor twice this year, if possible. I don't think we'll get it because of the USADA. I want to see Michael Chandler every pay-per-view. I want to see Michael Chandler because it's fun to watch, but I want to see Michael Chandler multiple times. These guys don't fight till November. They then won't fight again until sort of, we're looking at maybe March, April of next year. It's, and how much does the steam kind of run out? I think it's the show's set to air on May the 30th, but filming starts within the next couple of weeks or next couple of months. Does that sort of bad blood and does that hype kind of, reduce slightly? Obviously, the longer it is, I think so. And then
could you imagine if we get
whatnot.
do you remember the last Conor one where like him and Uriah Faber actually ended up liking each other quite a bit more? And it was just, there's no steam for the fight anymore.
That's the thing, and I think that I mean, you can't move on UFC socials for Conor snake in the grass about TJ and then Cody Garbrandt. Ironically, hindsight, but Cody Garbrandt sticking up for TJ Dillashaw, and that was a good series because it was kind of Conor, the Irish guy, on Team Europe against Uriah Faber, the American guy, on Team USA. It was kind of, quite a sort of mentality there, sort of siege mentality between the teams. But yeah, for me, I'm happy that it's McGregor. I'm happy that it's not Tony Ferguson because and I'm happy that it's Michael Chandler. I think Michael Chandler will be a really good coach. It'll be interesting to see who McGregor manages to get in because you've got Bellator Dublin coming up, which is going to be full of John Kavanagh fighters. You've got Gunnar Nelson competing at UFC London in March. John Kavanagh is Gunnar Nelson's head coach as well. Obviously, he does train out of Iceland, but he always has John Kavanagh in his corner. You've got Johnny Walker, who obviously trains at SBG.
I don't know how that's going to help him, but yeah, sure. Johnny Walker's there.
Yeah. You've got Johnny Walker, who is essentially going to, he's coming off a big win against Paul Craig, and he's essentially going to lose his head coach for 2 months, 3 months, or however long the filming goes on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who McGregor's coaching team. You'd assume that it's going to be Owen Roddy, John Kavanagh, definitely not Artem Lobov.
That's what I was going to say. Artem, right?
But does he sort of switch things up? And who? I don't know who Conor McGregor's jiu-jitsu coach is. I know he used to do a lot of work with Dylan Dennis. Obviously, that's kind of in the bin now.
Yeah.
So who does and Dylan Dennis? I really don't think Conor will go for Dylan Dennis. I don't think it's wise. I don't think the UFC would sign off on it. But at the end of the day, he would just be going to try and make a name for himself, and I don't think that's what Conor will want. This series will be about Conor McGregor. It'll be about Michael Chandler. And I think the fighters will take sort of, they'll be secondary. I mean, just off the top of my head.
That's the Ultimate Fighter since for most of the seasons now. It's been about the coaches more than the fighters.
Exactly. And I mean, I couldn't name you. I mean, I could because I've been doing research for UFC London, but Bianca Walker won the last series.
I've never heard of that person.
No, exactly. But from what I read something this morning that there'll be a few familiar faces this series, and I think it's a male series.
I wonder if it's going to be TUF 5 was like fighters who had been kicked out of the UFC. I wonder if that's what they're getting at. Another like Kevin Lee was just signed with the UFC. I wonder if it's going to be fighters like Kevin Lee and people like this.
Well, Kevin Lee. I mean, I don't know how he's managed to get back in the UFC coming off a single win against Diego Sanchez. But,
I know.
I'm not.
He's got an agent, man. He's got some good managers.
Exactly, and he's a name, I'm just trying to look now. Yeah, TUF will feature men's lightweight and bantamweight fighters with some familiar faces from years past.
Bantamweights from years. I
You
mean,
know,
yeah, yeah, okay. You got to get us to tune in. I don't know. I don't know who it's going to be, but bantamweight's not one of the divisions that we need enrichment. You know, if I was going to say like let's do men's light heavyweight or heavyweight,
yeah,
but yeah, bantamweight's fine. Yeah, sure. I guess so. But yeah, let's talk about the fight a little bit more just before we get to the big show. I am happy it's not Jorge Masvidal, just because I feel like I would struggle to listen to him. It would just get a little bit uncomfortable after like months of trash talk. We just get kind of tired of the shtick. Same thing with Tony Ferguson. We might get tired of the shtick, and I just don't want to see him get battered anymore.
yeah. I don't think that's a competitive fight. At least with this
Me
one,
neither.
we have a competitive fight, which is
Yeah.
exciting.
Hey, did you see the other one? Anthony Pettis versus Roy Jones Jr., Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stevens,
Yeah, I
Vitor
was going to
Belfort
say
versus Jacare,
we need to touch on this.
Jorge Masvidal, Gamebred Boxing for Paul Daly versus Anthony Taylor, Pearl Gonzalez versus. This is better than a lot of you. This is better than the UFC card we just had.
It's got more name value for sure.
Anthony Pettis versus Roy Jones Jr.
How is that going to work? Because I also heard that confirmed by the president of the PFL that Anthony Pettis is still on the PFL roster, potentially competing in this season's PFL.
It's got to be an exhibition so they can sneak it past.
It's an exhibition. Like these two, Anthony Pettis is not going to go out there looking to knock out Roy Jones. Roy Jones isn't going to go out there looking to knock out Anthony Pettis. This will be like Roy Jones, Mike Tyson. They'll have a little bit of a move around.
Yeah.
They'll talk about the respect. They'll talk about what Roy Jones has done in the sport. We'll see the Superman punch. We'll see the Showtime kick repeated. And, it's a bit of fun. These guys, if Pettis catches Roy Jones or Roy Jones catches Pettis, they'll back off or they'll fall into a clinch. This isn't going to be anything legitimate in my opinion. I don't, it's going to be a little bit of fun, a little bit of a move around, a little bit of a shuffle, and quite a bit of money for each guy, I imagine, because like you say, the car. I mean, do we need to see Jose Aldo beat up Jeremy Stevens? No disrespect to Jeremy Stevens, but he got outboxed by Jose Aldo a couple of years ago, that beautiful liver shot.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to see it with slightly bigger gloves? No, not really. Do I need to see Jacare versus Vitor Belfort?
No, I don't. That's a weird one
for me. Yeah,
because Jacare is not. He's fine with his hands, but Vitor was actually notable with his hands.
Exactly. I mean, the best Jacare I think we've seen with his hands was when he boxed up Chris Weidman, but even then, that was what. 4 years ago. I mean, Chris Weidman's been out for 2 years, and that was about 2 years before that. Paul Daly versus Anthony Taylor. I mean, Anthony Taylor, I'm pretty sure competed against James Gallagher in Bellator at bantamweight.
Okay,
it's just weird. Anthony Taylor, I mean, he's making bank off these Misfits cards. This has got a little bit of Misfits feel to it with legitimate names. And then Pearl Gonzalez versus Gina Mazzani. Gina Mazzani, the wrestler who didn't have, excellent striking. Pearl Gonzalez, who I think, with the greatest respect, is more famous for her OnlyFans than she ever was her UFC career.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And you know what? This is one that I'll actually go. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tune in and watch it.
Yes,
I'll tune in because we unlike the UFC card this weekend, unlike any Bellator, I've heard of every single person on this card. I've watched multiple fights of how many Jose Aldo fights have we sat through? How many Anthony Pettis fights have we seen? How many Jacare? Paul Daly. I just have his highlights on in the background.
Yeah.
I've watched Gina Mazzani versus Pearl Gonzalez fight. Gina Mazzani and Pearl Gonzalez fights before, and then Roy Jones Jr. How many Roy Jones highlights and full fights have we watched? Just a study of one of the best to ever do it in boxing. It's fun. It's a laugh. It's a money making. No one's getting knocked out. I don't think anyone's going to get seriously hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. I'm happy to see Jose Aldo kind of compete with guys that are in and around his kind of, I don't want to see him against like a Marab holding him up against the fence like we did in MMA. I don't want to see him against, Petty and Jeremy Stevens. I don't want to see him get out wrestled like he has done his entire career. like he did last time out.
What a dagger. You're like, I don't want to see Jose Aldo like he was old in his last few fights or be a crappy fighter like Jeremy Stephens was for his entire career.
No,
Is what you said.
no, you know, see, with Jeremy Stephens, he's a phenomenal stand-up fighter. He's got some of the heaviest hands that we've ever seen. But the
knockout of Rafael dos Anjos is just insane. That was uppercut. It was like a Mortal Kombat fatality. It's insane.
Exactly. But we just see him get out wrestled because people are scared of his stand-up now. Jose can't take him to the ground. So how does that one go? You know, like we said, we'll tune in because it's interesting, but it's a bit of fun, isn't it? Yeah, at the end of the day, you know?
And although it is a little bit sad because Jose Aldo is also has another boxing fight coming up, I think this week or something like that. But it's clearly for the money. He's fighting on like a Shudo boxing. You've ever heard of it? No one's ever heard of it. But like he's fighting some guys like 0-4, hasn't fought since 2019. It's like, man, a Hall of Famer needs the money, and I'm happy that he's doing fine. He's gonna win that fight, no problem. But it is sad to see that you get in the UFC Hall of Fame after a marquee career, and you're still not set for life. But again, we can talk about that.
This is a 10-year undefeated former champion, multiple-time title challenger, massive fight with Conor McGregor, and he's still fighting for the money. You know, it's the same with Chris Cyborg. She's been at the top of the game for. She's always been at the top of the game. Yes, she lost to Amanda Nunes, but that was at the top of the game. Then she didn't take a massive step down in competition. I think she fought Felicia Spencer after that. It's not a huge step down in competition. It is a step down, but not a massive step down. And she's still, you know, she's out here looking for boxing matches. I saw someone, I'm not sure if it was a parody account, but said that she opened up an OnlyFans. I don't think that that's true, but you know, this is the way that people are going. Multiple fighters now have got OnlyFans account. You know, Paige Van Zandt has probably made more from her OnlyFans than she has her entire fighting career. We've got, you know, Pearl Gonzalez, Kay Hansen, I think, has one. You know, these are girls that have fought in the UFC. I mean, even guys, you know, Kevin Holland, I think Billy Q's got one.
Yeah.
Kevin Holland's is excellent. He breaks fight news on there, and it's you know, he broke his fight against Tim Means on there. I don't, believe it or not, I don't waste my money on these things, but
it took you a long time to get to that point.
but there's people on Twitter that obviously, you know, I think they subscribe to people like Kevin Holland for the fight news, and it works. You know, they're the first guys breaking it because the big name, you know, Brett Okamoto, I don't think is flicking through OnlyFans on the way over to Australia this weekend, so it works. But it's the wider picture of fighter pay maybe puts a little bit of a stain on these OnlyFans accounts.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird thing. It's essentially the way fighters use it is more like you said, fight news. It's essentially like you could use a Patreon. It's just that everyone has heard of OnlyFans and maybe people already signed up for OnlyFans. It's definitely not for feet pictures and stuff like that. I like Kevin Holland and you know what I mean? It's just for like, if you guys want to pay me $2 a month so that I can remain a fighter, please do.
Exactly.
But yeah, essentially it's not for the content. It is just if you guys want to support.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll get one. Anyway, so let's move on to UFC upcoming this weekend, UFC 284. And I promise you that I've remembered both fighters' names.
I'm a better promoter than Dana White. Thank God that you mentioned it because I cannot.
People are saying, like, okay, so fighters, we have a good idea that like this guy's past his prime, this guy's washed. Is it possible for a fight promoter to be maybe a little bit past his prime, Frazer?
He's miles off it. I mean, it's not just, this isn't the opening fight in the prelims. This isn't the co-main event. This isn't a fight that's just happened where, you know, you've got so much going on in your head on fight night. This is number 1 versus number 2 pound for pound. And you've got the featherweight champion, Alexander Volkanovski, taking on the lightweight champion, number 2 pound for pound. You can't remember his name. It's Islam Makhachev. He is a killer. He's one. This guy, you know, there's been reports coming out that this pay-per-view is trending to be the highest ever pay-per-view, grossing pay-per-view, higher than Eddie McGregor. I don't think that's true.
I don't think it's true.
But this guy is potentially, you know, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say that is true.
Okay.
This guy is making you the most money from pay-per-views that you've ever got before, and you can't remember his name.
Yeah.
Do better. Just do better, Dana. And it's not the UFC. It's Dana White. Do better.
It's Dana. That's what we're getting at. And I think it was such a layup question. Like, imagine being a fight promoter and someone asked you, like, what legacy is on the line in the upcoming fight that you're promoting? What a slam dunk. What an easy question to get over the line. Like why was that such a hard question to answer? You know what I mean? Like imagine someone just like, it's such an easy question that you should have prepared at all times. And instead we got a stock answer and he couldn't remember the guy's name. Yeah, it's a stock answer because he said the same thing he always says. There was nothing new about that. You could have said that about any fighter.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like we say, you know, what legacy is on the line between Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak. That's a tough
one.
That's a tough one because I have no idea. And I didn't really care. You know, I woke up and watched that fight with my breakfast on Sunday morning. Weird. Yeah. But live as well. You know, sometimes me and you discuss, are these cards stay up cards or are these cards catch up in the morning? A lot of them lately have been catch up in the morning, but this one, I didn't even have to stay up. I had to just wake up at my normal time and watch it with my cereal. It was very strange. But going back to that one, this is lightweight versus featherweight. Never been done before in the UFC with regards to... Oh, no, sorry. Only been done once before with regards to double champ status by Conor McGregor.
Yes.
This is maybe, you know, for a long time, this is pound for pound 1 versus 2. You don't get that. You don't. The whole point of pound for pound is if everyone was the same way, who is the best fighter? So you do have, for the longest time, we had John Jones and Jose Aldo, never going to fight each other, worlds apart with regards to weight. You've got, you know, Amanda Nunes and John Jones in there.
Yeah,
never going to happen, you know. And this is, you know, you had Kamaru Usman, who's going to be too big for Alexander Volkanovski until obviously Usman lost to Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a fight that will happen. I don't see this fight happening as far as number 1 versus number 2 for another, you know, we could be talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
And there's no hype around this card. I have barely seen it until yesterday. And I know it's slightly different because we always hype it up during fight week. But even yesterday, it's not an awful lot of content. The UFC, I've seen considerably more slap fighting. I've heard a lot more about slap fighting than I have about UFC 284. This is number 1 versus number 2. You're looking, this is a fight to see who is the best fighter, mixed martial artist on the planet, bar none.
Yeah.
And you can't remember their names. It's not really being hyped. I mean, it's frustrating from my point of view. I'm sure it's frustrating from your point of view, and I'm sure it's frustrating from many people's point of view that, you know, Dana's not gone over to Australia yet. He might go, but I'm not convinced that he will. Joe Rogan doesn't go over to Australia.
No.
But this is a phenomenal. Why would you not want, if you can be cage side, why would you not want to be cage side for this? And it's not, you know, it's not the strongest card top to bottom. But it's a phenomenal main event. It's a brilliant co-main event. And then outside of that, you've got a number of
let me jump in on that one. But it's I think the more apt description is the Anderson Silva versus Georges St. Pierre, which we were cheated that we never got in our life. So finally, we do have a pound for pound number 1 versus number 2, and they're 1 weight class apart, and the parallels are all there. And we're not getting cheated. We're actually getting the fight that we want, and the UFC can barely promote it. Could you imagine Anderson Silva and Georges St. Pierre fighting pound for pound number 1 versus number 2, potentially GOAT status on the line, and the UFC kind of doesn't promote it? That would be preposterous. But we're seeing that.
It's ridiculous. And you know, we say that it's number 1 versus number 2 pound for pound, and unfortunately, the pound for pound rankings, I'm just looking down them now. You're going to get number 3 versus number 4. You're going to get number 5 versus number 6, but a lot of these guys, you know, Alex Pereira and Leon Edwards, are only in that sort of space because they beat the guys that they beat. They beat Kamaru Usman, who was number 1. He beat Alex Pereira, beat Israel Adesanya, who was in and around the top 5. Yeah. You got Aljamain Sterling and Charles Oliveira, never going to fight each other. Brandon Moreno versus Jiri Prochazka, 9 and 10, never going to fight each other.
Let him fight. Let him fight, man. Let him bang.
After that last performance, I don't see Brandon Moreno losing to anyone, so that could be an interesting one. But no, you know, it's interesting that this is, you know, men's pound for pound rankings. I think we should have overall pound for pound rankings, because you've got, you know, Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko. That's a fight that could happen. That is a fight that could happen. Make that fight. That fight, in my opinion, should have been the co-main event for this one. You got men's pound for pound, women's pound for pound. Happy days. But, you know, going back to the fight itself, I think it's a phenomenal fight, and it needs to be hyped up appropriately, because there are so many questions surrounding this fight that, you know, we could spend 2 hours just talking about this fight alone, but we've got to do this fight. We've got to do a really, really interesting co-main event. we've got other fights down the card. So it's, you know, it needs to be hyped appropriately, and you know, the MMA Sucka Crew are the ones to do that.
So here we are, pound for pound versus number 1 versus number 2, and I do want to talk a little bit about. This is such a style contrast. Let's get into the technicalities of the fight. Did some tape study in the last little while here, and honestly struggled a lot to do it. And I'll get to why. But typically, we want to have everyone on the same, at the same chessboard. So when it's striking, it's very easy that we're all on the same chessboard. When it's on the ground, it's very easy because we're all at the same game board. This fight, we're not even at the same playing table. So it does become very hard to compare these two because we want to see how does Alexander Volkanovski counter wrestle in his past fights. Well, we've barely seen it. The takedowns that he's countered are usually low singles, and he pops right back up when it does happen. Those don't correlate at all to what Islam Makhachev does with body locks, with Kimura takedowns, with clinch to trip takedowns. So he is fighting a game that he has never seen before. And I don't know if he has the chops to do it. Now, he has the confidence, and I've heard him in interviews. The confidence is absolutely all there. Some of the other experts looking at, this is opennotegrappling.com, helped out with looking at some of Islam's past fights with Arman Sarukian and Mansour Barnoui of where he struggled. And it's really things like butterfly guards, because you never want to have a top position grappler like that set his weight on you. Can Alexander Volkanovski do that? He's going to have to, or else it will be a quick night for him, because there's not a lot of options. When someone like Islam Makhachev is on the ground on top of you, they progress to the point that the fight is finished. You don't have a lot of opportunity, so you can't ever let them set their weight. So the next question becomes, have we seen his butterfly guard? No, we have never seen his butterfly guard, if it even exists. The only other, like, he is training with Craig Jones, so I'm going to assume that he is fairly well-rounded. But on the exact flip side of this, on the feet, I actually don't think it's close at all. On the feet, I think Alexander Volkanovski has outstruck much better strikers than Islam Makhachev is or has ever faced in his career. We've seen the numbers that Alexander Volkanovski has given up a lot of strikes. Well, yeah, he's fought better strikers. He's fought much better strikers than Islam Makhachev is. If Alexander Volkanovski can keep it standing, this isn't a bold pick by any means. I think he actually wins the fight by a knockout. I want to believe in Alexander Volkanovski due to how confident he is, due to what an incredible story that would be. But realistically, I'm having trouble seeing that timeline. But Frazer, help me out a little bit here. What do you think? What do you see in this one?
Yeah, completely agree with everything that you're saying. I think that's some really good analysis that you've done there as well, because, you know, like you say, as soon as Islam Makhachev gets you to the ground, he's not a John Fitch kind of guy where he's just going to try and hold you there, and he's progressing straight away. I mean, we saw against Dan Hooker, took him down, progressed slightly, couple of shots maybe, Kimura, bang, it was over within. I mean, it was a little. I mean, from the takedown to the Kimura was under a minute, under 30 seconds even maybe. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll try and pull it up now, but it's a difficult one to. So yeah, Islam Makhachev had 1 minute 48 control time over Dan Hooker. I think that's what he needs to do if he's going to try and. I think it was on the countdown show that he said he might try and stand with Volkanovski. Not a good idea. And
not a good idea as well. Yeah.
And if he does, I think he should maybe try and get him to the ground early when Volkanovski's dry, when he's not covered in sweat, because, you know, this is. Everybody knows it's more difficult to grapple when both guys are hot and sweaty, because, you know, you slip out. Like you said, it's difficult to look at how Volkanovski defends when he's on his back, because he's not on his back for long periods of time. Against Chad Mendes, you know, relentless wrestler, really, really strong wrestler. You know, he's able to control McGregor for 5, 6, 7 minutes of their fight back in 2016, 2015, 2016. Then he fought Volkanovski. He took Volkanovski down 3 times, but the total control time for Chad Mendes was 45 seconds across 3 takedowns. So you're averaging Volk is being controlled for an average of 15 seconds per takedown against Chad Mendes, who knows how to hold a guy down. You know, if Islam Makhachev gets that double leg on Volkanovski, which, you know, that I think Volkanovski knows, I think you know, I think I know that Volkanovski at some point is going to be taken down, and they admitted that in some footage that I'd seen, that his head coach is like, he was saying, look, we know we're going to get taken down, so it's then focusing on defense when we're down there and getting back up once we're down there. And we've seen a lot of stuff of him grappling with Craig Jones, obviously to kind of prepare himself, which is exciting in itself. I think that could be vital. I think Craig Jones, I imagine, will be in his corner as that sort of jiu-jitsu mind in Volkanovski's corner. But if he does get taken down with that double leg, he has to look at freeing one of the legs. And what I think is going to be really difficult is we've seen with Volkanovski, when he gets taken down, if he's anywhere near the fence, he'll kind of scoot backwards using both of his hands to kind of push himself up, move his ass backwards, push himself up, move his ass, and get his back to the fence, and then work the get up from the fence, which is what we saw against Chad Mendes. The thing is with Islam Makhachev is when he takes you down, he's instantly, and it's not just Makhachev, it's a lot more people now, but it's the Dagestani wrestling sort of way of doing things is take you down, bang, instantly lock onto a wrist. So you haven't got two wrists. So you're then relying on maybe one hand to try and push your opponent away, try and get that, wherever the opponent's head goes, their body tends to go, but you're looking to push that away whilst trying to scoot back with no. It's going to be tough for Volkanovski if he does get taken down. But he has to not allow himself, too much time in the center. If he is going to get backed up, back himself up against the cage. He doesn't want to get backed up. Of course, he wants to be on the front foot, and that's the kind of style and striker that he is.
Yeah.
But if he is going to get backed up, make sure that he's never too far. He's never in the center of the octagon, because if he is going to get backed up, and if he is anticipating the takedown from Makhachev, a takedown for Volkanovski when he's up against the cage is going to be harder for Makhachev to work a submission, because he's not going to be able to work that side. And it's going to be harder for him to control Volkanovski if he's got that sort of, that third wall, that wall to kind of, be able to get up. And, you've got the ground, you've got Makhachev, and you've got the third thing to sort of almost help you get up is the cage wall. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough. But Volkanovski also has to do something early on the feet to prevent Makhachev from just diving in at him. He has to, he's the best, in my opinion, maybe Adesanya, but he's the best feinter of strikes in the game. You never know when he's going to go. And even when he does go, you never know if he's going to go with one, if he's going to go with two, if he's going to go with, he never fights on the beat as it's called. He doesn't fight jab straight, jab straight. It's jab, and then he'll throw a straight and he'll step through into southpaw, and then he'll back off and then he'll throw a leg kick. And it's never, he never gets into, ironically, in my opinion, he never gets into a rhythm. Of course he does. He gets into a striking rhythm where he finds his range and he's managing to work the leg kicks. He's managing to work the jab and the hooks and the shots. He landed a big uppercut against Max Holloway. But he never gets into a rhythm where it's readable from his opponent. His opponent's never managed to read his movements because it's single jab, and then he'll double the jab up, and then he'll step straight through with the right hand and he won't set it up with a jab, and then he'll work the leg kick, and then he'll maybe he'll rush in, but then for a whole round he might just counter strike. It's so difficult to read, which makes it so difficult to do tape study on him, because for a sort of, for Max Holloway, everything works off the jab, and he'll work that jab. He'll stand quite side on at Stephen Thompson. Everything works off that front leg. That front leg is constantly up and down, up and down. With Volkanovski, it's so difficult to read because he doesn't do the same thing every single time. He doesn't work off the jab every single time. He doesn't work off a lead leg. He doesn't, he throws a lot of leg kicks, but he doesn't rely on those leg kicks to set up his other strikes, which I think might confuse Charles Oliveira slightly, because it's
Islam.
Because it's not like Charles Oliveira, who walks forward in a Muay Thai stance with that lead leg constantly bouncing, who's got a high guard and will look to walk you down, look to grab onto your wrists and work in the clinch. Islam's never faced a striker like Volkanovski before, and it is, I think the only striker sort of almost on a level with Volkanovski, and it's not. I mean, he's not nearly on a level. It is Dan Hooker. But Dan Hooker's not on the same level as Volkanovski as far as striking. He's just a striker who, never really looks to take the fight to the ground. So I think it's going to be really tough for Islam Makhachev. And I completely agree. I think if this fight stays on the feet, I think Volkanovski definitely has the edge. And I do think he could probably narrowly outpoint him. But I'd be interested to see. He needs to hurt Makhachev with something early and gain that respect, because Makhachev is seeing Volkanovski as the smaller guy who's coming up. He's a short guy, naturally, and he needs to gain that respect early. But he has fought. We haven't seen him, but he has fought at welterweight before. He used to be a big guy, so having that extra 10 pounds, I don't think he's gonna. How we often see fighters who maybe go up a weight class, they're not used to the extra 10 pound on their frame. He's used to being a lot bigger than what he is. So I don't think that's going to affect him massively.
Well, yeah, the cardio, usually I would just say Volkanovski is fine. He fought 70 minutes with Holloway and looked fine throughout. Putting on an extra 10 pounds, it's an unknown. We don't know. But I do like what you're saying with Volkanovski might have the right game on the feet to be countering some of the takedowns by controlling the center. Like you said, he's seen a ton of wall walks in his career. That's his primary way of getting up. So there are some notes here and there to say, like, he could potentially get up. It's a matter of if he's fast enough, if he is actually good enough. And we don't know what the answer is. That's why they're fighting. But yeah, there is a path for Volkanovski there. Like you said, he will absolutely get taken down, but I think there is a path forward here. And a few of the other notes. So with striking, you and I are fine. I know that. You and I get it. When it comes to grappling, I make sure to look up stuff and consult with experts, just because I know my limitations and I'd rather just consult with an expert. But the Dagestani signatures are body locks into leg rides, into wrist control, and then chest to chest half guards. Typically what their game is. And they're so good at it because each step of that controls the other person and stops them from moving. Like the leg ride is what we see with Khabib sitting on a person's leg, controlling the hips. It's a very hard position to get out of. The easiest counter to it is don't get in it, but that's not realistic. But yeah, Volkanovski has never faced a grappler like this. However, Makhachev has never faced a striker quite like this. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the height is only a 4-inch height disadvantage for Volkanovski, but it's going to make it easy for Makhachev. He isn't going to have as much kind of body to have to travel. Like you say, that they go from the half guard and they look to go chest to chest, and they're holding everything is going to be smaller, more compact than like a Charles Oliveira, for example, who is a lot taller than Volkanovski. Charles Oliveira stands at 5'10", the same as Islam Makhachev, and he was able to control Charles Oliveira, step over, move pretty fluidly through Charles Oliveira's sort of game, through his guard. Same with Bobby Green, 5'10", Dan Hooker, 6 foot, and he was able to just seamlessly move through these guys. He's going to have to put kind of less on it, and I know that might seem stupid because it's he's 4 inches smaller, but there's going to be Makhachev is going to be able to distribute his weight across more of Volkanovski's body due to his size, and like you say, the best defense is kind of to not get in that position. Well, like I think we've both alluded to, and Volkanovski's team's alluded to, he will get taken down in this fight.
Yeah.
And, maybe for an entire round, he'll be controlled because Makhachev's just going to be the bigger, stronger guy. But we've never seen Makhachev go late in a fight for a start. I think the latest he's gone is, he's gone
3 rounds, I think.
He's gone 4 rounds with Thiago Moises, but that was sparring pace. That wasn't Thiago Moises never really came, in my opinion, to win that fight. He took it on late notice, and it was, it is what it is with that fight. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Volkanovski threatening submissions to try and get up. He's working with Craig Jones. Craig Jones isn't an MMA fighter, jiu-jitsu guy. He isn't a guy who fights MMA and's got a good jiu-jitsu. He's a submission fighter. Don't be surprised if we see Volkanovski, feint a Kimura, look to maybe get a Kimura to get up against the fence, wrap Makhachev's head and maybe look to give him a little bit of a squeeze. Even roll for some sort of leg attack. This is Craig Jones. We're not putting enough into the fact that he's training with Craig Jones, who is, he's not known for his MMA training. He's known for his jiu-jitsu grappling. What better guy to have in your corner? Maybe Gordon Ryan, but what better guy to have in your corner to defensively, use submissions as a defense rather than use submissions as, actively. I don't see Volkanovski jumping guard and going for a guillotine in this one. It's not going to happen. What I maybe do see is him, looking to maybe twist a Kimura or work, you know, like I say, work his arm into a guillotine situation as Islam Makhachev is shooting in, just to maybe put that in the back of Makhachev's head and kind of, you know, as a little preventative, as, you know, look, if you get in this position again, I'll look to take your neck, and it's going to put Makhachev off if he, you know, if he does feel that Kimura grip a little bit tighter than he expected, he gets his arm a little bit further back, he's naturally going to stand up and try and get out of that position, which then gets Volkanovski back to his feet, where he can work his striking game, as we know. So don't be surprised to see, you know, submission attempts on Volkanovski's side. This is not me picking Volkanovski by flying armbar. This is me just saying I can see him working submissions as in an attempt to get back to his feet once he's been taken down.
Yeah, the Craig Jones is like the X factor. Like, we don't know how effective that is. And it's not the same as, like, if Craig Jones trained to me, it's not going to help. It's not going to make any fucking difference at all. But someone like Volkanovski, presumably he can pick up these kind of athletic feats very quickly. Some of the defense, some of the offense. And Craig Jones, like you said, he submits good black belts, and they're just like, yeah, it's Craig Jones. What do you expect me to do? Beat him? Yeah. Like, he's very good. But yeah, phoning him in, that's the thing of, like, training with Craig Jones makes me think that they're going to be well prepared, that Islam can't give them anything that they haven't practiced, that they haven't worked on. There's not going to be any surprises. There's not going to be any positions that they haven't worked on. The problem is, like, a lot of those positions are shutting the opponent down. What do you do for a leg ride and a Dagestani handcuffs? Like, there's very little to counter it. Like, once you're in that position, you're in trouble. But I do imagine that they've practiced all these things. But do you think the worst case scenario is Islam wins? Because then we just go away with, like, yeah, that's why pound for pound exists. That's why weight classes exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've written a betting tips piece. Like, I've put Islam Makhachev by third round, I think, submission.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because, you know, do I believe that'll happen? There's a good chance that'll happen. Like I said, I spoke to Gillian Robertson yesterday, and I just got her quick views on this fight. Nice. That interview will come out probably tomorrow. She doesn't fight until April, so there's no rush to get that one out. But she said, I think I'm with everyone else. I want Volkanovski to win, but I think that Makhachev will win. And nice. Like you say, there's only so much that Craig Jones can teach you before you kind of realize how strong Islam Makhachev is.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you can't really teach. Yes, Craig Jones is a lot bigger than Volkanovski. He's probably a lot, you know, but he's a lot bigger. He might not be stronger as far as, like, MMA grappling is concerned than Islam Makhachev, but you can only prepare people for there's only so many things that you can prepare people for before they get in there. And it's interesting to sort of see how much of Craig Jones's game we'll see in Volkanovski's. But yeah, going back to your original point, I think let's say Volkanovski wins. I'm not interested in a rematch between these two, because Makhachev has got one win in title fights prior to this. It's not like he's been a dominant champion for years gone by. He's got one win in a title fight. He's
got one win in the top 10.
In the top 10, exactly.
It's just a matter of how good he's looked, but let's be realistic. He has one win in the top 10. This is the biggest fight of his career thus far.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, you know, and if Volkanovski wins, I think that's probably what the UFC want, because he's not a massive pay-per-view star. But if you now put two belts on, a belt on each shoulder, you drape him in two belts, it opens up a whole, you know, it opens up Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, you know, a Chandler if he decides to come back down after facing McGregor, Rafael Fiziev if he beats Gaethje. All of those fights it opens up, which are fan-friendly fights, because all of those guys I've just named are strikers as well. You know, Charles Oliveira is obviously a submission guy, but he loves to strike.
Yeah,
Alexander Volkanovski is a striker, and unfortunately, we're at a time in the UFC where people don't really appreciate grappling for what it is. They know that Islam Makhachev can be dominant, but is that dominant Dagestani wrestling style? If he sits on, if he realizes that he's too big, too strong for Volkanovski, but he's not, he can't work the submissions. If he just sits on him for 25 minutes, is that entertaining?
I know.
No, it's not. You know, this is why people didn't like John Fitch. This is why people, you know, used to get on at Kamaru Usman. You know, when he kind of just sort of rode things out. So I think, yeah, I completely agree. Makhachev winning, sorry, just kind of doesn't. What does it really tell us about Makhachev? He still won't have beat any. He still will have only beat one person in the top 10 of his own division at lightweight.
Yeah.
And it might just, pound for pound greatness is on the line, yes, but
Yeah, I know.
he's just
I know.
yeah. Oh, you're bigger than Volkanovski. You're stronger than Volkanovski. Great. He'll go back down and he will wipe the floor with any featherweight that steps in with him. It's a difficult one, but yeah, I think my official pick will be Makhachev, maybe by late stoppage, most likely by unanimous decision. But this is it's in Perth, it's in Australia. That could give Volkanovski that extra drive, that extra, sort of extra little push in the final few rounds. And I don't think it will play a massive factor, but Khabib's not in Makhachev's corner. I don't think,
It's another X factor there too. Like, does that
exactly.
matter?
There's
Does
a
that
lot of
make a difference? We
storylines
don't know.
around the fight.
Mhm.
If this was in America, I don't think, I think the fight would be a lot more even. But because you've got Makhachev, stepping into enemy territory, it's exciting. It's exciting, and I can't wait for it. I'm not sure what time it will be because it's in Australia.
That was my next point. I don't.
Yeah,
Is that morning for us?
I've got no idea what time we're looking at, but
I think the US has some nice, maybe 10 in the morning. Actually, I don't know. UFC 204.
But just while we're quickly talking about times, I know we'll go on to talk about the co-main event in a second, but
3 a.m. GMT, and I think that's the undercard. So I'm going to assume that you and I are actually pretty good. Oh, no. For us, undercard 11 p.m. So no, it's about the same for us. This is it's not better.
It's it is what it is. It's
I might get up early for that, for the main event, because the rest of the card is but the main event I kind of like.
Yeah, for sure. But just going on, UFC 286 in London is prime time for UK fans, but it's also pay-per-view. So not only could you not get tickets, but now you've got to pay £20 to watch it.
They know
the card is average, but we'll talk about that nearer to the time. Co-main event UFC 284.
Yeah,
I don't know why this got a belt attached to it. This should have a I'm facing Alexander Volkanovski next belt attached to it, not the interim title, because Volkanovski fights too regularly for it to, he's not injured. He last fought in July. He's now fighting again in early February. That's what, 5, 6, 7 months.
Yeah.
I don't quite know why this has got an interim title attached to it. Maybe because the card isn't all that strong.
There's 2 championships on the line. You should pay $90 to watch this.
Exactly. And it doesn't really, it just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it really does. I actually didn't realize that it had an interim on the line until you mentioned it just now, just because it doesn't make sense to me.
It just doesn't resonate as an interim title fight either, because why is it an interim? I just don't get it. Like I said, I don't get it. There's plenty of divisions that could probably warrant an interim title fight. Sure. Before, Francis Ngannou was out for over a year, and it'll be 7, 12, 15, 16 months before the heavyweight championships contested.
Sure.
And there was no interim bout even available. The women's bantamweight hasn't been defended since last July either. No signs of an interim. Volkanovski defended in July of last year dominantly, probably could have defended again, but obviously chose to go up in weight, and yet this one's getting an interim slapped on it. I just don't get it, but it is what it is. I know. It's a fun fight. It's also, it doesn't do anything in case, let's say worst case scenario, Makhachev pulls out of this fight.
You move one of these guys up, no problem there.
You move one of the guys up, but to do what? To if Makhachev pulls, but I'm saying if Makhachev, you can't then put the lightweight title on the line, because Makhachev is the champion. You can't put the featherweight because Alex won't be able to make featherweight. So it doesn't really do much for the fight. I don't know. It's a fun fight. Let's just talk about the fight itself, not the trinkets that are surrounding it. Because
I know what you're saying. But so Josh Emmett, Yair Rodriguez, one of the bigger prospects that we've had, very active for a few years, took a few years kind of away due to injuries and other things like that. Getting back into it, had a great fight with Max Holloway. He's doing quite well now. Josh Emmett, he's a brawler. He's a guy who leads with his face. I've never been overly impressed with Josh Emmett, not to be rude. I wouldn't write that to his mother or something like that, but I don't think he's that talented of a striker. He's not that talented of a counter striker, but he's made it this far. I'm actually surprised that he's made it this far in his career. So maybe I just keep being wrong about him and his toughness keeps persisting, but I do see him. Official prediction, Yair Rodriguez has to knock him out, right? This is a setup to get a spinning back kick knockout, right?
Yeah, although, I mean, I completely agree. I don't know how Josh Emmett's got this far. I thought he actually lost to Calvin Kattar last time out.
Yeah.
These guys are just so inconsistent. You know, Yair Rodriguez fought once in 2022 for 4 minutes and 11 seconds against Ortega. He never really got going in that fight because it went down as an injury.
Yeah.
Emmett only fought once, narrowly, in my opinion, losing to Calvin Kattar, and he went 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Yair's 2-1, and he's got that no contest for Jeremy Stevens since 2019. And Emmett completed once in 2020, once in 2021, and once in 2022.
Yeah.
I just don't get this fight. I mean, it's a fun fight. I think it, like you say, I think it's a little bit of a layup for Yair Rodriguez.
It is,
because he's a new fresh face in the title picture. But he's coming off one win and it was an injury. You know, Josh Emmett's ranked below Arnold Allen. I know Arnold Allen now has got the fight with Max Holloway, but he's ranked below Arnold Allen, who's on a longer winning streak. Is really catching a lot of sort of heat at the moment with his win over Dan Hooker and whatnot, and then the win over Calvin Kattar, which again, yes, it was an injury, but it's still a win. I don't know why Josh Emmett's getting this opportunity. Yes, he's on a decent winning streak, and I think it's purely because he's an exciting fighter. But to fight once in 2020, once in 2021, once in 2022, and then he's got to fight more times this year, but he's not young, Josh Emmett. I can't remember quite how old he is, but he's not. I mean, he's born in so he's 36, 37.
Not young. This is it. He's got to make this run work now.
He's got to win this fight.
Yeah,
and I don't think he does. I think he like you say, he leads with his face. He just swings wildly and looks to land a bit. I think that knockout of Michael Johnson was maybe the worst thing to happen to him because he swung wildly and landed big on Michael Johnson and knocked him clean out.
Yeah.
So he kind of believes that that's the way to strike and land. He's still at Team Alpha Male, so I don't think he's going to progress out of that sort of swinging wildly. And at 36, 37, he's not changing his style now. He's not becoming a slick kickboxer now. Yair Rodriguez has to be the matador, in my opinion, in this one. And Josh Emmett has to, like I said, I don't think he will, but he has to change up his style. If he swings wildly at Yair Rodriguez will drift slightly out of range and slam the counters. I expect an all-action fight. I think it'll be a slow start, but from then I think the guards will be all-action. They land over 4 strikes each per minute, which is quite a lot.
It's an active fight. It should be a moving
for each
fight.
fighter. Yeah. I personally don't see a finish because Yair Rodriguez, he's fun, he's good, but he doesn't have a lot of finishes. Again, on this betting tips piece I've got coming out, I think I've got this one over 4.5 rounds because, in my opinion, Josh Emmett, there's no denying that he's got power. I mean, he did knock out Michael Johnson, but he went the distance with Shane Burgos, he went the distance with Danny Ige, he went the distance with Calvin Kattar, and he's not going to be landing one of those big swinging punches on Yair Rodriguez to knock him out. Now, we think of Yair Rodriguez and the knockouts and whatnot that he's got, but if you look at the guys that he's knocked out, Andre Feely with that sort of switch head kick, that was back in 2016.
Like 16.
I'm not talking about the BJ Penn knockout because I think Augusta Vare would have knocked BJ Penn out at that time. Then he got that back elbow on Korean Zombie in the last second of their fight. Amazing, but I think that's a mixture of it being them having gone 20. That's not knockout power, in my opinion. That's them having gone 25 minutes. He lands a crazy shot that Zombie wasn't expecting. That's not legitimate knockout power. He then went the distance with Jeremy Stevens. He obviously lost to Max Holloway. He did hurt Max Holloway in that fight, but realistically, the shots that he landed, he should be putting Max Holloway out. And then, yes, he's got a finished victory over Brian Ortega, but it was a shoulder injury that that doesn't show any power on Rodriguez's part. He's a phenomenal striker. He's an exciting striker. He's spinning shit all the time. He's doing, you know, spinning back fists, spinning back kicks, jumping, flying, roundhouse kicks, all this. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's got like sort of that knockout power that we maybe require to put someone like Josh Emmett away, who I believe has only been knocked out once, and that was that brutal knockout from Jeremy Stevens that kind of broke his face in multiple different places. Yeah, he's only been knocked out once. He's got an 18-2 record, but like I say, at 36, he's 37, so he'll be 38 next month. It's now or never for Josh Emmett. I think if he loses, he maybe retires, because I don't see him getting another title shot anytime soon. I think if he wins, I think he gets outpointed by Alexander Volkanovski, but we'll have to see on Saturday night or Sunday morning for us. Yeah. If he does get over that hurdle. He's a good wrestler, but I don't see Yair Rodriguez being taken down and controlled. I think that Frankie Edgar fight at MSG put the fear of God into him, so he's just drilled takedown defense from there on out, and I don't see him being taken down and controlled by Josh Emmett, who prefers to stand.
Yeah, no, nothing to add on that one. The rest of the card, I don't see anything that's worth talking about. Loma Lakbumi from Thailand, that's a cool one.
Yeah,
other than that, holy, this dropped off, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jack Della Maddalena, I think I'm excited to see him. 3 first-round finishes in as many fights in the UFC. He's facing Randy Brown.
Yeah, should win.
Randy Brown has to mix it up against Della Maddalena to get him keep him guessing.
Randy Brown's like he was a developing fighter who hasn't actually developed his skills over the last 5 years, kind of. I think I think he's still at the same point, but he would look promising.
For sure.
And now he's still in the same spot is the problem.
I didn't realize that Randy Brown's been in the UFC now since 2016, early 2016. So that is crazy to think that he's still kind of the gatekeeper now, for Jack Della Maddalena. He's got 4 losses on his record. In his second UFC fight, he lost to unanimous decision to Bilal Muhammad, which, has aged quite well. He had that crazy hammer fist loss to Nico Price, from where Price kind of trapped his head. And then he lost to Vicente Luque by knockout. Yeah, Vicente Luque knocked him out. Well, Vicente Luque knocks a lot of people out. Since then, if you look at the competition, Alex Oliveira finished him by rear naked choke. Alex Oliveira is no longer in the UFC. Jared Gooden, unanimous decision. Chaos Williams, split decision. Francisco Trinaldo, unanimous decision. He's not a prolific finisher. He does have finishes, and I think I can see Randy Brown looking to take this one to the ground and maybe testing Della Maddalena's ground game. But we saw against, I think it was Ramzan Ameev. Ramzan Ameev. He got up pretty easily, Jack Della Maddalena. So I do see a JDM win. Yeah, probably. I do hope to see him go a little bit further in the first round, because I just want to see him tested, to be honest. And even Danny Roberts couldn't test him. So yes. We're hoping Randy Brown does at least extend him into the second or third round. But I do see Della Maddalena getting the win in this one.
Yeah. I agree with you. Jack Della Maddalena, he should absolutely win this one. I like Randy Brown. Talk to him on Xbox Live or whatever people say, whatever the meme is. It's true though. He'll talk to you on Instagram sometimes, even when I wasn't in the industry. Nice guy, but I mean, he hasn't developed in the ways that you want to see someone develop. The rest of the card, what do you see that you like, that sticks out to you?
If I'm Australian, I'm excited about this card, because just looking down the card, every single fight apart from Tukagov, who opens the card, and the Loma Lookbone versus Elise Reed fight has an Australian in it. Yeah. Obviously, the co-main event we've already touched on. That doesn't, which is why I think it's strange to put that fight on this card. But Justin Taffer, I think he'll either knock Parker Porter out or get held up against the fence for 15 minutes. Jimmy Crute returns. Jimmy Crute at one point was the most exciting thing in the light heavyweight division, but then obviously he had that weird leg injury against Anthony Smith where his leg just kind of ceased to work. That was strange. And then obviously he got knocked out by Jamala Hill. Not, that's aged quite well. Taking on Alonzo Menafield, who I don't really get Alonzo Menafield. For me, he's just a big ball of muscle, but I'm excited for that fight to open up the main card. Tyson Pedro looking to go 3-0, having, I don't know if he was cut from the UFC or he just had a lot of time out. after losing to Shogun. So he lost to Shogun in 2018, and then since then he's looked like a killer. He's returned. He lost in December of 2018. He returned in April of last year. 2 finishes, both in the first round. He takes on Medeiros Bukauskas, who cut from the UFC after that horrible knee injury he suffered against Khalil Roundtree. He's got 2-0 in Cage Warriors and re-signed to the UFC on fairly short notice. That's exciting. Got Jamie Mullarkey, who's name a boring fight that Jamie Mullarkey's in. Great fighter, really fun fighter, and he's always in exciting fights. And I'm excited for the return of Shane Young, even if it's just for his crazy sort of hacker-based face-offs where he sticks his tongue out. Dana White goes to give him the handshake and he completely ignores him and does the throat slit kind of thing. It's fun. Why not? But just looking out on Tapology, it's slightly disappointing that we're not seeing Kai Kara France on this card. Obviously, he's got the injury, and then if you remember, this is a card that we were supposed to see Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. That's obviously not materialized.
Contract issues, UFC just wouldn't pay money for him, and that's
UFC going to UFC with the contract issues. And then outside of that, this is a pretty slow week. We've got the PFL Challenger Series again. No. Abraham Balbi, I watched in London. He's good. From a sort of selfish point of view, I hope he does well because of obviously the UK kind of bias. We've got LFA this weekend. LFA 152.
It's not a lot. Muay Thai this weekend on Friday, and then Glory Kickboxing on Saturday. But yeah, it's a very light weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And we've got Jade Sheely competing at LFA. Obviously, Nate dropped the interview with her this week. You can find that on the podcast feed now. So what we're gonna do going forwards is every interview that we do, either myself, Tim, Nate, sometimes Jeremy drops interviews as well. We'll be dropping on the podcast feed. So if you see, on a random sort of Thursday or a Friday, an extra podcast, that's just it's an interview with one of our guys and whoever. Like I say, I'll put the Gillian Robertson interview up on there tomorrow. She speaks moving down to. She talks to me about moving down to strawweight, her experience in TUF, and then making a run at the strawweight title later on in the year. So that'll be coming into your ears tomorrow. But expect the podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, all decent podcasting. And if we're not on it, it's because it's not a decent podcasting platform.
That's right. No, looking forward to the Robertson interview coming out tomorrow. That'll be a banger. But yeah, name's Tim Wheaton with MMA Sucka, joined as always by Frazer Krohn. Frazer, what do you got going on this week? What are you writing?
Yeah, so I've got a little piece on the return of Shane Young. I always, like I say, I'm a big Shane Young fan. I think he's a great fighter. So I've got that coming out. I've got a couple of betting tips piece with a couple of bets that you could choose to take or not. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, because as my MMA Sucka picks maybe allude to, I'm not always the best at picking the winners in these ones. And then I think I've got 2 articles in the pipeline. I've got a top 10 post-fight interviews ever, and it's a good laugh. And then I've got a piece that will be coming out later on in the week, top 5 beatdowns, where we expected a much closer fight and we just got a one-sided fight in favor of fighter A, for example. So yeah, be sure to keep an eye out for that.
Looking forward to it. Links will be down below for everybody, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.